Hey guys, how's it going? Hope everybody's doing great today. The video I wanted to focus on today was featuring the artwork in Sorcery Contested Realm and just talk a little bit about how it's unique, how I think it kind of stands out from other TCGs in the marketplace today, how it compares to early TCGs. I'm going to focus as a comparison point some of the early sets in Magic the Gathering for some comparison points, and Sorcery draws influence from that game. So what I have here in the binder, I was going through my old Magic cards, nothing too crazy. These are probably mostly revised edition, and then the first, I guess, a few expansion sets beyond that. But I went through. It was kind of fun going through the old decks of cards and binders and things, and picking out the artists that were also selected to work on Sorcery Contested Realm. So what you're looking at here is a page from Ian Miller, and just fundamentally, when you look at the construct of the card. You have some basic similarities, where you have the card title up top. It's a slightly different layout for Sorcery, and I'm going to show several Sorcery sample cards when I speak to this. But you have the title at the front, the mana cost, the type of card here, Summon Serpent, in this case. You have the card mechanic, and then in some cases you have the flavor text of the card, right? But, a thing that really stands out is that it only uses about half of the spacing of the card itself, so the image is a bit compressed. But to Magic's credit, something that was very appealing in the early days is that the cards were fairly simple and straightforward. I'd say these Ian Miller cards are actually a little more complex and detailed than some others you might see from Alpha, Beta, Revised, things like that. And some of that is because it was just done quicker on tighter timelines, and it was just early stages of TCGs. That's just how it was, I guess. So, I'm going to go through the binders, look at a few. It's funny, this is my kid's Pokemon binder too, so I was just using this for an example for this video. But you have Margaret Organ Keen. She has this kind of really beautiful style where she weaves in patterns into all of her different artworks, as you can see, and that carries forward into her work today and into several of her Sorcery pieces, which is very nice. If we go through, I have a couple pages of Jeff Menges cards, and I think Eric selected some of these artists just because their work looks so iconic just at first glance. I mean, Jeff's is a great example of what you want to see in a card. There's one focal feature point for each of the cards. It gives you a very distinct idea of what the purpose of the card is. It kind of, from a storytelling aspect, you just have an idea, right? Like this card is called Tracker. And this guy has his walking stick. He's out in the woods with kind of a pensive look, and you could tell he's tracking something. It just has that kind of vibe. And Sorcery does that very masterfully. You have the title, the type line text, which I'll talk about, which you see more in the Sorcery cards above the box. And that's where you also find the rarity in Sorcery. The card mechanic itself, and then sometimes you have the flavor text and then the artist name at the bottom, right? So Jeff's work is kind of timeless. The work he's done for Sorcery has that feel of his early Magic the Gathering work, and I think again, that's why he was selected. Margaret Organ Keen, Melissa Benson, Drew Tucker, Jeff Easley, Tony Sudlow. A lot of these artists from those early days, Liz Danforth is another. There's several that Eric selected for this look in particular. And, I guess Jeff's into this kind of Celtic style, so he had the Citadel Druid. This is a card from Antiquities that is one of his most famous artworks. And there's a very cool, there's like a artwork or two in Sorcery that kind of draws inspiration from that too, I believe, which we talked about when I interviewed him. Here's some more from Jeff. You see the Swords of Plowshare, another one of his iconic cards. But again, just the simplicity and design, or not that it's overly simple or basic, it's just very focused, and that's what you need in a TCG. You need to understand what the card does when it's out in play, what its purpose is, and it looks distinctly different from other cards. One thing that Magic did well is the color types really come across very distinctly. You have the whole card in red, white, blue. Then artifacts, had the tannish type color. And then let's see. Okay, all right, so we're going through. I had a page with some Liz Danforth, from some of her early sets. Not the earliest most, but just here's a few from, looks like Ice Age and maybe probably 4th edition or revised or something like that. All right, and then we get to some of the Sorcery cards. And then look, you get to this beautiful full art, right? And this is a very powerful page here. These are the unique rarity sample cards. So these are extremely rare. We only believe there's probably potentially 2 to 3 copies of some of these cards in existence, or to be in existence even after the Kickstarter fulfillment. So these are very special. You know, here you see the similarities, right? You got the card title at the top. These particular cards are relics. So you don't see the power level on the right, but typically you'd have a mana cost on the left, and then you'd have the mana and the threshold like you see here on Predestination, 0 cost for mana, 1 earth threshold. And then if it were a minion, you would have another, the casting cost matches the power level for simplicity as well, you know. So let's say this was let's go with one that actually has a cost, the Spear of Destiny. If it were a minion, it would have a 4 casting cost and then 4 power level, damage and power. Or defense, essentially, right? So again, you know, a very distinct and bold difference is the full frame going to the edge. In early Magic the Gathering, that was an issue, I believe, that with the limitation of printing in the early 90s, this may not have been possible to have quality control and consistency in the print. So now in the advancements of modern print and technology, we have the benefit of card design like this. And actually, I'm pretty surprised more games don't do this, you know, and maybe we will see that happening after Sorcery, but many of them still have like a border, which, you know, is a compromise, right? It's kind of cool that, you know, it can be used as a way to distinguish types of cards, colors of cards, whatever your thematic bundling is of different types of cards, I guess you'd say. But in Sorcery, they solved that problem by having the type distinctly noted here in a type line text above the box. So that's a nuance that's different from Magic. The full art is different. The power levels and mana costs is a bit different. And then in the banner and the color around the boxes, that also gives you an indication of the elemental type. If it's fire, air, wind, or water, right? So that's, you know, beautiful cards. I'm going to show some examples. Let me put the binder away and go to some of these sample cards. All right, so another point I wanted to talk about. I got several sample cards here. Let me shorten these stacks a bit so we can see them. Just going through the artwork, you know, there's over 400 cards that's going to be in the alpha set, and I'll just speak as I'm flipping through. As you go through the cards, you know, there's no one thing. When Flesh and Blood came out early on, the professor, who's a major figurehead or, you know, YouTuber type, I guess you'd call him, in the Magic scene, he analyzed the game. You know, he started getting into it, and he talked about how a lot of the art design was a bit homogenous. You know, Flesh and Blood is very interesting art. It's all digital, which is a very distinct difference. You know, maybe they have some traditional, but I believe it's largely digital, whereas Sorcery is hand-painted, you know, so that's one difference right there. But the point that the professor had made is that when you looked at a lot of the cards from their first set, Welcome to Wraith, and then Arcane Rising, just the color tones, the kind of vibe of the cards, it looked a little bit homogenous or samey in his opinion, and I guess I would generally tend to agree that you know, when you have the games out in the play state and they're out there on the board, they did look a bit similar, like especially if you were new to the game, you know. And I think that's something that Sorcery has done very well. Is they've solved that issue in a number of ways. For one, when Eric talked to the artists and he commissioned this artwork, he gave them a lot of creative latitude to work within their own unique style, right? So here you have a Melissa Benson card, great example, right? And she has this very vibrant look that she's always had in her artwork throughout her career. This is really beautifully done. The coral reef harpy. I love how this is like underwater. If you kind of look at it and study it a bit, you pick up on some of those nuances. But some of the color patterns and things, I mean, when you see her card, you just know it's Melissa Benson, right? And then I'll go to another example. Here's a Drew Tucker, right? He has more of this kind of abstract style, I guess you'd say. He's always had that. It's the refinement. Like, look at these guys in the background, right? They're not super detailed and refined per se. And then even kind of like the structure here, this is really cool, something like only Drew implements, or uniquely to his style, right? And just kind of like this I could see like Jeff Menges doing something similar with this cart or whatever this thing is. That's one thing, it's not always obvious in a Drew Tucker artwork, and that's intentional. I think he wants the viewer to really interpret it in their own way. And I actually talked to him about that, and that's exactly what he said. But, when you see a Drew Tucker artwork, you just kind of have a hunch and know that it's him. Tony Sudlow, another example, if you're familiar with Tony's work from Dungeons & Dragons, when he was with TSR, or stuff he's done for Magic the Gathering, he's got a very unique style. And then here, a new artist that many of us discovered for the first time through Sorcery. This is Andrea Modesti. And he uses this watercolor type design, so the uniforms or the gear kind of on the soldiers in a lot of his pieces, and the horses and things like that are very ornate or very colorful, and you just kind of know that it's Andrea when you see it. Here you have a Vincent Pompetti. There you go. Here's another Andrea Modesti, right? It's just got that. So it's a similar style within the artist, but there's so many artists. I think there's about 30 artists that were commissioned for the alpha set. So with that breadth and variety, you get a lot of stylistic diversity. So as you're going through your binder and you have these laid out there, you're going to, have kind of like an art collection within your binder. And when you're playing the game, you're going to know exactly who the artist is. I've been into this game for a long time, so every card I see, I know who the artist is immediately. I don't even have to look at the card. I know that's Mikhail Nagypal, right? And this is Vincent Pompetti, because their styles are unique and true to their own style. They weren't like pushed into a singular thematic style to fit like a set theme. In Sorcery, there is no uniform set theme, and I think that's another point that is also by design, because the game itself is designed to be very experiential. You are navigating your avatar, you are trying to control the realm in a tactical and strategic way, and position yourself across Atlas sites and corner your opponent, try to get them to do things that they don't want to do, try to protect your minions, your creatures, leverage spells to control the board states, place your atlases in a strategic way, and it's an experience, right? It's kind of an adventure, and you feel that in the artwork. When you see an artwork, it's supposed to. I'm going to show some specific examples about how the artwork is supposed to tell a story, but not the complete story. You are in control of the narrative, but when you see a card, you should know. The goal, as they were designing this game, is that you should know exactly what that card does, or at least some idea of what it is. And after you have a little bit of experience playing, you're going to get there and you're going to know that very quickly. All right, so now if I set these cards aside, there were a few that I wanted to show specifically to illustrate the point of the artistic approach in Sorcery. All right, so I'm going to clear my desk space, and we're going to go through a few examples, and I will highlight where I think the design in Sorcery was very brilliant. All right, so here you have Brian Smith, and this card is called Ice Lance. So, the game followed a top-down design where oftentimes it would start with the title of the card. And then when Eric commissioned these with the artist, and I know this from, comments Eric and the company has made through my communications with many of the artists. I've interviewed a ton of the artists and just talked to them quite often. And I've done a lot of behind the art features on my website, collectorarthouse.com. You should go check that out. So oftentimes the art direction was very simplistic in almost all cases, in fact. So Eric did that because he wanted to allow the artists to work within their own style and have the creative freedom to come up with their own concepts. So he had a loose idea of what the card might do, what he needed it to do in the game, and other times maybe not. He might have started with the artwork and backed it into the design. That's some of the beauty of Alpha. When you're first starting a game, you're kind of trying to refine it and work it out, right? But in several cases, he would give the artist only the title. So Ice Lance here. Now this one, I presume, was probably more collaborative, right? Because you see it says exceptional magic of cold precision. So you have this like cold flanking spear, and actually Brian told me this was like a telephone pole piercing through these guys, right? That's the way he interpreted it from the title and the loose description that Eric gave him. And then the damage pattern is 5-3-1, deals 5, 3, and 1 damage. So 5, 3, 1. you know, and the perspective of the artwork shows it more prominent and bold and large at the near point of the card, and then off in the distance and horizon, they get smaller and smaller to simulate the declining damage over the realm, right, and over those sites where this damage would be inflicted. So deal 5, 3, and 1 damage to targeted minions. So these minions are taking the damage in a line from your spellcaster. All right, so perhaps like this guy is the focal point, you know, casting the spellcaster, and then he's inflicting that damage in a line, 5, 3, 1, from large to small. Right, so that's a really beautiful card. And talking with Eric and the artist, and just in my own observation, the title of the card, the illustration itself, the type line text, and the card, excuse me, the card mechanic and flavor text where it does exist, where there's a lot of design energy put into making sure those were very tight. All right, so another great example here. Of course, I picked one very difficult to pronounce. The Brobdingnag Bullfrog. So this is by Nikel Nagypal, and it says an exceptional beast with a giant appetite. So, you know, you got this chunky frog, right? He's got a giant appetite. So what does it do? You see it, and it looks like it's, you know, postured in this defensive way, or just maybe even an attacking type way, looking to swallow something whole and eat it, you know, like a giant bullfrog. It says this bullfrog swallows and carries the first minion it attacks in its belly until it leaves. So, you know, the illustration implies the effect. It swallows it, it carries it, and it carries it in its belly until it leaves play, right? So it's sitting there and kind of chunked up with something that it just devoured. Next, beautiful card by Francesca Beraldi. This is really phenomenal, how she captured the essence of motion, and this is quick motion, right? So if you look at this, blink. So blink is a term that implies something happening very quickly, very rapidly, right? So it's 0 cost to cast. It says ordinary, quick, short distance magic. So it's quick, short distance, right? So the spacing of this this hero looking figure, right? She's here, and it's kind of faded out in the background, or kind of like a homogeneous type grayscale color. And then in a blink, it draws your eye to the focal point where it just looks like it moved in a flash, and this blurred paint here or pattern kind of gives you that impression that of movement from there to there, right? And the smaller rings expanding and going from blue to red, just incredible. And then there's just like these streaky patterns that are subtle but like so important to the design concept and the composition of this card. So it says move target friendly minion to a nearby site. So it's coming closer to you. It's moving the minion to a nearby site, so to a closer site. And if blink is cast on your turn, draw a spell. All right, and then the flavor text says blink and you'll miss it. Just masterful. The combination of the title, the illustration, the type line text, the card mechanic, and the flavor text there is just so tight and well done, just so thoughtful. You know, you don't get this in a lot of cards nowadays. You usually get the title, the illustration, the mechanic, some sense of what type of card it is. But you know, I think Sorcery really hit a home run, hit it out of the park with their attention to detail and design. All right, next one, land deed. All right, so what does a deed look like? What would a deed do? It marks like a pact or an agreement between two parties, right? So let's see if that holds up. Land deed for the title. You kind of got the deed and you got the stamp there looking like it was just freshly stamped under candlelight. So it's kind of got that ancient relic type feel, and that's the type of card it is. It's a relic, an exceptional relic of indisputable claim. All right, so it's a deed. Again, a pact between two parties, an indisputable claim. The controller of this deed controls the site at its location. So the game mechanic has a controlling effect. You know, if you control this deed, you control the site at its location. And then in the flavor text says possession is 9/10 of the law. And I should caveat here, these are sample cards, right? So these are early design developments. I also want to give the company kudos that in the alpha version of these cards, this was even more so tightened up. In a lot of these cases, the title was refined. In some cases, type line text, game mechanic, all of those things. Flavor text, sometimes changed, sometimes omitted, you know, for more of like an aesthetic balance, I think. And just how the card presents. Sometimes a flavor text can add value, and sometimes it's overkill and doesn't, right? And it could be a distraction. So, you know, a lot has evolved, but even in these early sample card form, you could still, you know, really appreciate that attention to detail that went into the design. And then, of course, in some cases, the mana cost change, the rarity change. Those are all gameplay type changes to make sure the game was balanced. But what I'm focusing here is the art, right? So leave that aside for the moment. All right, so now Old Salt Anchorman, Vincent Pompetti. Now, Vincent is really a master at capturing emotion, motion, and just a vibe and essence of what a card is designed to do. So the Old Salt Anchorman, you know, you get this old salty kind of guy on a pirate ship type thing, and he's carrying this very heavy anchor on his shoulder, and he looks tough, right? He looks rugged. He's kind of, you know, he's pretty ripped. He's got shorts on. You can see how muscular he is in the legs and things, and he's in this kind of like defensive posture, right? Carrying this very heavy object, looking like he's carrying a heavy burden on his back. And it says, an ordinary pirate mortal holds steady and true, right? So in this kind of like slightly bent posture, like almost like doing a squat, he's carrying this heavy oar, and he holds steady and true, right? So the artwork is just so perfectly done. It's this beautiful balance between art and text to really evoke an emotion and experience and a vibe to that card. And then it says, this anchorman and nearby allies are immovable by enemies. So again, like that essence of immovability. You know, he's carrying this heavy anchor. He's anchored to the ground in his posture and positioning, and immovable by enemies. You're not going to nudge this guy. And then it says, we stuck, nor breath nor motion, as idle as a painted ship upon a painted ocean. Interesting quote. We stuck, nor breath nor motion, right? So we're stuck, no movement, immovable. All right, and lastly here that I wanted to feature is the Highland Falconer. This is a beautiful artwork. Again, Andrea Modesti. You kind of just know just by looking at it. Just the way the colors, the watercolor that he uses, the color of the clothing that the focal point in each art composition and illustration is wearing, and just kind of like the beautiful scenery in a lot of his work, right? So the Highland Falconer, an exceptional mortal calls for his bird. All right, so a mortal is this man out here, out on the land, calling for his bird, you know? So like a falconer, they do that thing with the glove. There's probably a term for this, right? But they wear the glove, and I remember this from like Boy Scouts back in the day, right? I went and saw this happen. For some reason, the birds are attracted to the glove. I don't know if they put something on it, if it's scent or taste or smell or what, but the bird comes and perches right on the glove like you see here, and it symbolizes this man calling for the falcon. And then Genesis, which means it's an effect that is born like right when you play it into the game, right? So Genesis, move target airborne minion to the same site as the falconer and ground it until end of turn. All right, so with this card, he is drawing in an airborne minion, and it's drawing it to his site, right? So the falconer is a perfect vessel or person or body to draw a site into draw a minion or a object into a specific site in the realm. So again, beautiful choice, picking the falconer. That's what falconers do. They draw the birds of prey to their hand, to their location, and just that beautiful tight correlation between title, illustration, typeline text, game mechanic, and flavor text when applicable. This is you're going to find pervasive throughout Sorcery that really makes the difference in gameplay. You know, I've watched a lot of games played and kind of really got an appreciation for the flavor. I'm more on the art spectrum and collector spectrum of things, but I got to say, this makes the game more special to me. Just the attention to detail, the care that went into the design. It just makes the illustration and the artwork feel more important, more cared for, more relevant. It's like a tribute to the artist, a tribute to the designers. It's just really beautifully done, and makes the game different and special, and makes you feel good to collect it, right? That's it, guys. Let me know if you like this in the comments here. Please like, subscribe, share with your network. If you like this type of video, I'd love to do more of these featuring the cards and the art design and artists in particular. I think I'll do more with specific artists since I have a pretty vast collection of sample cards here. So thanks for following along as always, and sorry I ran a little long this time. We'll try to keep them a bit shorter in the future. Take care. I'll see ya.